If I may have your attention, please. At this time, we're going to begin the services here in our chapel for Mrs. Sandra Sandie J. Rubin. As we begin the service, I would ask if any of you might have a cell phone or any other noise-making device, please turn them off at this time. Officiating the service here today is Rabbi Rachel Kaplan Marks from Temple Beth Israel here in Skokie, and the rabbi will begin the service assisting the family in the ancient tradition of Kriya. If I could ask the family members wearing ribbons to please stand together at the front of the chapel.
In some ways, it's hard to believe that we're actually here this morning at Sandie's funeral. Because even though Sandie was sick, and not just with the cancer, but really sick for many, many years, Sandie never focused on the sickness. She was vibrant and joyful. She was a beloved friend, daughter, sister, aunt, wife, and mother. The heartbreak is profound, and yet there is also a sense of profound gratitude for having had Sandie as part of our lives. For Sandie's life that united us, for her love which death cannot sever, for her companionship that was shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of her heart and mind that brought joy and happiness, we offer thanks to God. At this tender time, we turn to our tradition, looking for words that might offer us some measure of comfort. The 15th Psalm describes a person who is upright, honest, and good. The psalmist, all those many, many generations ago, may well have been describing Sandie. So too does the imagery of God's tent evoke the painful truth that time on this earth is fleeting and oftentimes far too short. Adonai mi yagor ba'ohalecha, mi yishkon bahar kodshecha, holech tamim ufoel tzedek, udover emet bilvavo. Adonai, who may abide in your tent, who may dwell in your holy mountain? Those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who scorn the lawless but honor those who revere God, who give their word and come what may do not retract, who do not exploit others, who do not take bribes. Those who live in this way shall never be shaken. In the most difficult moments, moments such as this, we turn to the words of the 23rd Psalm for comfort. They remind us that even in our lowest of lows, none of us are ever alone. I'll recite the psalm first in Hebrew, and then I invite you to recite the translation with me in English, which can be found on the inside of your folder. Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binot deshe yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yanahaleni, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni b'magle tzedek lama'an shemo, gam ki elech begeit sal mavet, lo ira ra, ki ata imadi, shivtecha uminshantecha, hema yanachamuni, ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai, dishanta vashemen roshi, kosi revaya, ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yamei chayai, v'shavti beveit Adonai, la'orech yamim. Let's recite together in English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Kohelet, otherwise known as Ecclesiastes, reminds us there is a time for everything, a time for every experience under heaven. There is a time for silence and a time for speaking. Now is the time for speaking. Sharing loving words about Sandie, we'll hear first from one of her dear sisters, Sherry, and then from Sandie's beloved husband, Joel.
Our sister Sandie was our gift. I didn't think I was going to be crying this much. I was told on my 5th birthday that I was going to have a baby sister. The twins, Ellen and Carol, and I now became a foursome. Boo and I shared a bedroom during our entire childhood. She was my baby. She became Boo when she pretended to be a dog as a young child, the beginning of her lifelong love of dogs. The 4 of us Garber girls were so lucky to have each other. We always had each other's backs. This was evident when our Boo got sick at age 14 with lupus and spent most of a year in the hospital. She rallied and finished high school and went to college. Lupus reared its head at times, but Boo was a fighter, and I think all of you know that. She met and married the love of her life, Joel, and lupus rose again. Boo was adamant that the most important thing in her life was to be a mother. She beat all odds and gave birth to our beautiful Jamie. She fought a fierce battle to be able to care for Jamie and won the battle for a long time after receiving the gift of a perfect matched kidney from our sister Carol. Boo's love for Jamie, Joel, and her dogs brought her joy for many years until cancer reared its ugly head. Boo fought the good fight and got to see her daughter married to the wonderful Ted and to see almost a full gestation of her grandson. He will know his loving grandmother through all of the love and wisdom passed from his grandmother to his mother. Boo's life has been a blessing to all who knew her and will continue to be a blessing to all who will know her through all of us that love her. And my last thought is, every time you see something that is special between you and Sandie, Boo, know that she's there with you and seeing you and returning to bring you love, whether it be a cardinal, whether it be a greyhound, whether it be something special between the two of you. Think of one thing that was special between you that you knew about her, and always be looking for that special sign that she's back with you. Thank you.
I'm sneaking in. Wow. My mom was simply the best. And man, did we have some amazing times together. I'll never forget our summer walks to 7-Eleven for our favorite Slurpees, going to all the Evanston art fairs, our trips to California and New York to visit family, just walking around Target and Old Orchard to pass the time and just to be together. And we loved watching our favorite movies on repeat, which we still have in the basement on VHS. When I decided to get a dog, not a husband, she was a little nervous about me having to take care of her alone. But, like the supportive mom she always was, she came with me to pause, and once we met a little dog formerly named Deandra, now Daisy, she completely melted and fell in love instantly. She almost had the same reaction when meeting Ted. Every time Daisy would go to visit her grandparents, she would immediately run to my mom and start crying and giving her kisses and all the love in the world. But like my mom, school did not come easy for me, and she did everything she could to make my experiences more enjoyable. I think the most important thing she taught me, besides marry someone that loves you more than you love them, sorry, Ted, was that I am my own best advocate. She said she will always be there to support me, but I need to speak up for myself when I need a little extra help. It was and still is the most valuable lesson and has gotten me through life, and so did she. Now, to finish with a quote from one of her favorite books that we used to read together. I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always, and as long as I'm living, my mommy you'll be.
What a crowd. Better than a Sox Park crowd. I want to thank you guys all for coming from near and far. I know Sandie would really appreciate you all being here. Then she'd apologize for ruining such a beautiful day. It's so hard to believe she's gone. I can't talk about the entire world, but for our little corner of the world, it's less of a place with her not in it. We were together for over 40 years, which means I have a lot to say, so get comfortable. Sandie truly was an inspiration to everyone who met her. What she went through every day of her life, without a complaint and with that smile on her face, that was something to behold. I think that smile was her mask covering all her pain and suffering. Sandie never felt normal like you and I, but you'd never know it. She just kept on going in spite of all those medical problems that we always joked about would have filled an entire season of the show House. Amazingly, people would actually complain to Sandie about them not feeling well. And Sandie would say to herself, "Do you have any idea what I'm going through? Come take a look at my medicine drawer." But she didn't. She actually sympathized and cared. Sandie was a warrior, tougher than any SEAL Team 6 member. She knew that no one battling this kind of cancer comes out a winner, but man, she fought hard and never gave up. But it wasn't just cancer Sandie fought. Sandie faced death so many times throughout her life. Which reminds me of my favorite haiku poem. Well, actually, it's the only haiku poem I know. It goes, "You only live twice." Yes, it's from the James Bond novel. "You only live twice, once when you are born, and once when you look death in the face." Well, so according to that, Sandie lived a cat's 9 lives. Sandie looked death in the face throughout her life. Lupus, multiple hip replacements, a kidney transplant, thank you, Carol, a pregnancy that required bed rest and her ballooning to 200 plus pounds. Of course, Sandie made sure there was no pictures to prove that. She had congestive heart failure, a severed liver, thank you, Lutheran General Hospital. Even COVID, that one's on me. She beat them all. Miraculously, she even beat the formidable foe of Jamie as a teenager. That was a tough one. Sandie looked death in the face so many times that she taunted him with, "Is that all you got?" Well, it wasn't. He still had cancer to throw at her, and not her run-of-the-mill cancer. No, he made sure it was rare and severe. In late 2019, Mr. Death gave her something that made sure Sandie's 9 lives were up. You can Google these later. Ampullary cancer and Whipple surgery. Brutal stuff, but she fought way longer than any of us would have. So now here's some things I'm going to miss about Sandie. Like I say, it's been 40 years, so we kind of bonded. I'm going to miss watching her be a mom to Jamie. She was the best. They would talk every day, and Sandie was so proud of Jamie, of her work, her son-in-law, Ted. She picked a good one. And we all know that she would have been the best grandma ever. The idea of being a grandma was what really kept her going. And all she needed was another month. But all Sandie ever wanted was to be a mom. Against her doctor's wishes, she became one, an amazing one at that. I give Sandie full credit for all the great things that Jamie has become. I'll take the blame for the bad ones, except one, and it's kind of related to driving. Now, I did teach Jamie how to drive, and for anyone who's ever driven with her, I sincerely apologize. But Jamie learned how to swear from the best of them while driving. When Jamie was still young enough to be in her car seat, God forbid someone should drive too slow or cut Sandie off. If that happened, Sandie would weave a tapestry of obscenities that, as far as we know, is still hanging in space over Lake Michigan. She worked in profanity the way other artists might work in oils or clays. It was her true medium, a master. That's from the movie Christmas Story, and it was one of our all-time favorites. More things I'll miss about her. Sandie's love of dogs. She could live without most people. None of you, of course, but she couldn't live without dogs. From our first crazy dog chief to Celie, our sweetest, who's doing fine at 15 but just couldn't make it out today. Sandie loved cuddling, petting, or just watching our dogs. Her phone is just filled with pictures of Celie and Daisy. It was her best medicine, and that's why a couple of her favorite charities are for the dogs. I'll miss her love of food. Man, she may not have looked it, but Sandie loved to eat. And lucky for me, she loved to cook. Every week there was always a new recipe she just had to try. And they were always great. Except for that pot roast recipe. Remember that one? Yeah, Sandie loved to eat. That's why this form of cancer was so cruel. It affected her appetite, so eating became almost impossible. But every now and then, she still had a taste for Hubs, Indian food, Mexican, and riccobennis. Now, for those of you who have no idea what a riccobennis is, it's an Italian sandwich and pizza shop by Sox Park. And after working Saturday night Sox games, I'd stop off at riccobennis and bring dinner home. She so looked forward to chowing down at 10 o'clock at night on a chicken Vesuvio and Italian beef or a meatball sub. I'm really going to miss traveling with her. We were the perfect travel companions. You know, there was a commercial about regretting places not traveled to. Well, Sandie told me she has no regrets about that. Whether it was our trips to Disney, DC, Niagara, or New York City, or trips overseas, we always had a great time, despite a couple potholes along the way, like dragging her through the Gettysburg the Gettysburg battlefield on a cold, rainy, miserable day, or torturing her with a side trip to the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, or seeing a Yankees game at Old Yankee Stadium on Mother's Day, no less. She put up with all that just to make me happy. So let me again say to you, thanks for putting up with me. She loved Hawaii, London, and Italy, especially Italy for the food. She was like Stanley Tucci out there, enjoying everything she ate. From street pizza by the Trevi Fountain to our dinner in Venice, she couldn't have been happier, especially since she was firmly committed to having a gelato a day. Our trip to Israel was really special because we were able to be with Jamie when she was working over there. She loved having Jamie be our personal tour guide of Tel Aviv, and I'll never forget watching her meditating alone on top of Masada. She was so at peace with herself. Our last trip was to Greece, and it was her dream come true. In fact, when she was younger, she had a giant jar labeled "Trip to Greece" that she filled with coins. Now, those coins would probably have gotten her as far as Pittsburgh, so we added a few more coins, and she made it to Greece on her 60th birthday. And every minute there was magical. She willed herself to the top of the Acropolis, and for her, that was like climbing Everest, but she made it. She saw the sunset on Santorini, and then there was the Greek food. Sandie was never happier than when she was eating pasticcio overlooking the Aegean, or going to the 24-hour bakery at 1 a.m. Nothing could spoil that trip to Greece, not even missing our return flight home and having to sleep overnight in the Athens airport. I'll miss our date nights. Our life together started on a blind date at the movies, seeing the remake of Nosferatu. An odd choice, you say, but she liked it, so she passed that test. And after the movie, we had pizza and beer at the Candlelight on Western. She passed that test too. In fact, in her younger days, Sandie could drink beer with the best of them. That's the one thing Sandie and Brett Kavanaugh have in common, her love of beer. We were always going to the movies and sometimes to the theater. She loved her lavish Broadway musicals, and we saw her absolute favorite one at least 8 times. And she could sing every word to it. Sorry, Rabbi, but Sandie just couldn't get enough of Jesus Christ Superstar. I'm really going to miss just plopping down in front of the TV with Sandie and watching everything from Jeopardy to Colbert and all those crime shows in between. It's going to be so strange finishing them up all by myself. I mean, we were in the middle of so many of them, and I just hope that wherever Sandie's final destination is, she has a good cable package so she can find out how Better Call Saul ends. And I'm going to miss watching the Blackhawk games with her. Well, maybe not this year. But I'll always have fond memories of her being a Hawks fan and watching the games on TV or going to the UC. You know, Sandie was never, ever into sports until she read a romance novel about a hockey player. And then she got hooked on hockey and the Hawks. I'm just so glad she didn't read one about soccer. She followed the Hawks religiously and would tell me who's been traded, who's injured, when the game's starting. Now, here's how I know she was a really big fan. The only time I gave Sandie a gift that made her cry, and by that I mean cry happy tears, not, really, you bought me a vacuum cleaner tears? Well, she cried when I gave her an autographed puck from her favorite goalie, Scott Darling. Those were happy tears, and it was so cool. I could go on and on about Sandie, but according to Doug, I got to end this sometime. So here are a few final thoughts. When we got married, I wore this cardinal button at the wedding. She didn't know about it, but I wore it underneath my suit. Now, obviously, I wore it because I'm a huge Cardinals fan. But I have it now because Sandie told me the Cardinals are a very mystical bird. I just thought they were better than the Cubs. So I Googled Cardinals and found out that many cultures believe that cardinals are emissaries from the dead, and in order to get in touch with us, our departed loved ones use these birds. So now, when I wear one of my cardinal shirts and hats, I'm going to be keeping in touch with Sandie. And maybe you Cub fans might consider wearing some Cardinals stuff too, okay? Almost done. I want to repeat what I said earlier, that our world is less of a place with Sandie not in it, but we are richer for all the great memories she's left us. And finally, yes, finally, here's a quote from Robin Williams. He said, I won't do an impression because I can't, he said, "Death is nature's way of saying, your table is ready." Well, Sandie, your table is ready, and I hope they're serving you all of Stanley Tucci's favorite dishes. You will be missed to no end.
We've already heard such loving words, and Sandie had so much love in her life. And she, in turn, loved her family with everything that she had. You, her dear family, were the very core of her life, of everything she did, and who she was. Sandie was a devoted daughter to Phyllis and Irving, Zichronam Livracha. Being the youngest of the Garber girls, Sandie had special relationships with each of her sisters. She had so much fun with Ellen. She learned how to be a mom from Carol, and she learned how to be a strong, independent woman from Sherry. She too had special relationships with her nieces and nephews and grandnieces and grandnephews. More than anything else, though, Sandie loved being Joel's wife, and she especially loved being Jamie's mom. Though she was already quite ill, she glowed with joy and happiness at Jamie and Ted's wedding. And more than anything, she wanted to be here to meet and to hold Jamie and Ted's baby, who is due to arrive in this world next month, B'Sha'a Tova. There is no doubt that this baby will know Sandie through the beautiful memories that all of you, this incredible family, will share. Sandie was special. She was the perfect hostess. As you've heard, a wonderful cook, her chicken soup and turkey being among the family favorites. And she would always put out the best snacks for Jamie and her friends or for her Maj group. It brought Sandie such joy to have a house full of laughter. Sandie loved nature and dogs and all animals. She loved to sit with friends on her screen porch overlooking her backyard, observing the natural beauty of the world and its creatures. Sandie was a talker. She could talk to anybody, anywhere. She cared, and she wanted to know people's stories, and she wanted to tell hers too. Sandie valued her community, especially her community at Temple Beth Israel. TBI is how I got to know Sandie. By the time that I met her, she was already living with a great deal of pain. I quickly learned, however, that Sandie was a force to be reckoned with. And I learned that Sandie was a lot of fun. She was a lifelong learner. Even when attending classes on Zoom, she was perfectly put together. And she didn't hold back. She spoke her truth, even in sickness. She spoke to me about her desire to organize a support group for those in our community affected by cancer and other serious illnesses. Sandie was deeply involved at TBI and especially in our sisterhood. She had many good friends there with whom she enjoyed the simple joys of life. Sandie understood the ways that the community should function. Each year, before she declined, she headed up our Challah for the Holidays project, creating and then organizing the delivery of a Rosh Hashanah package with challah and grape juice and a sweet note to those members of our community who had suffered a loss or illness over the past year. Sandie understood that while a community should certainly show up for the everyday moments and simchas, it was equally, if not more important, for a community to be there for the difficult times as well. Though Sandie had many valid reasons to complain, as you've heard, she wasn't a complainer. On the contrary, she chose life. She chose to live a life full of love and joy, even through the pain. And when the choices were presented about her treatment, she chose to keep going, because more than anything, she wanted to be here with you, her dear community, her beloved and cherished family. Even in her final hours, Sandie clung to life. And so now we honor Sandie and we honor her life. We pray that Sandie be free from the pain and suffering that plagued her for so long. And we pray that Sandie's soul now cling to the eternal. We pray that her soul find its home and be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. I invite you to please rise. El Male Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamatzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Kezohar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Shulamit Bat Yitzchak Vafegel, Shahalcha La'olama, Baal Harachamim Yastireha, Beseter Knafav La'olamim, Vitzror Bitzror HaChaim Et Nishmata, Adonai hu nachalata, v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava, v'nomar amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Sandie Rubin, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. Together we say, Amen. Please be seated.
This concludes the service here in our chapel. The interment will take place immediately at the family's plots at Memorial Park Cemetery, 9900 Grosse Point Road here in Skokie. Following the interment today, the family will be sitting Shiva this evening at the Rubin residence from 6:30 until 8 p.m. with a minyan service at 7. That information's on the inside portion of the funeral service folder you should have received. If you did not receive one, they are available as you depart today. I'd also ask that you please take note that the family has asked for specific memorial contributions in Sandie's name. For those of you watching online, that information's on the website you are currently on. For those of you going in procession with the family to the cemetery, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please make sure you obtain an orange funeral safety sticker. That sticker should be placed in the front passenger side of your windshield. We would also ask that you please have your bright headlights and flashing hazard lights on at all times. For an additional measure of safety, our staff will be placing magnetic flags on the tops of the vehicles throughout the procession. As we drive in procession today, please drive as close as safety permits to the vehicle in front of you at all times. We want to avoid having any large spaces or large gaps in the procession, particularly as we pass through the intersections. The following individuals who are members of the family will be serving as pallbearers today. As I call your names, if you'd please step forward. Ted, Tom, Mark, Asher, and Scott. At this time, I would ask everyone to please rise as Sandie and the rabbi and family are escorted from the chapel. Thank you.